I'm Michael Pierce, and this is The Human Condition. Today's episode is about prioritizing supplementation and diets. In the practice of complementary and alternative medicine, there is some little science, not just hokum to decide how a person might go about choosing a diet, combining a diet with another diet, or selecting supplements and what's important. It's very possible for a new clinician or an individual who's not very well trained or just beginning in this world of healthcare to do an assessment and to take a history and to maybe even do a diet diary and come up with a list of deficiencies or things that are not quite up to par. A person might decide that they have a whole bunch of deficiencies of minerals and vitamins. They might decide that they want to take a number of nutraceuticals, which are not essential but that are useful. And they develop this massive list of things to take. And they end up with a bushel basket of products that they can't digest. So what we like to talk about is the concept of prioritizing supplements. When we look at the chemistry of humans and mammals, it's very important to understand that some things are more important than others at a certain point. A lot of patients are given vitamins because vitamins are essential. Other patients are given nutraceuticals because they're powerful, and the nutraceuticals drive enzymes and they drive chemical pathways in the body. And that's also very useful. However, one of the things we have to realize is that if a person is given a nutraceutical, which is an herb or a substance that drives enzymes, that person may have an underlying deficiency in the factors that make those enzymes work. And so something that gooses or stimulates us to produce more of a product with an enzyme, we may not always have the raw materials we need. It would be almost like, yelling at a bricklayer to make a wall faster, but we don't give him enough bricks, or we don't give him enough mortar. So we could yell at him all day long and make him work harder, but he's just going to produce a shoddy wall, and he's not going to be able to produce it because he doesn't have all the pieces he needs. So we have to supply him with the pieces if we're going to goose him into more action. So this idea of prioritizing supplements really starts at the bottom. So I'd like you to think about essential nutrients as nutrients that you will die without. So we start with the very basics. The first thing we need is oxygen, because we'll die in very short order without that. The next one is water, and the next one is minerals. So we really could spend a long time, and I do spend a long time, studying minerals with my patients and working on what minerals they need and what minerals they might have too much of or too little of, if they have too many heavy metals, which is also possible. And the most important factor for you to know is that minerals are cofactors that make vitamins work. So if you've ever taken a formula of herbal supplements or vitamins and they worked for a short while and they didn't work after that, usually after a few weeks, what often happens is the patient burns through their mineral supply and then they don't have enough cofactors for the vitamin to keep working. So the vitamin works at first and then it doesn't work and it poops out. So this method would be to take balanced minerals first. Now, the question might be, what minerals? Well, gosh, there's probably over 70 minerals that are not radioactive that we all need small amounts of, and some we need large amounts of. Now, there's the macro minerals and there's the micronutrients and micro minerals or trace minerals. The trace minerals blow around the air on the planet. They are largely inhaled. They are taken in through the lungs in very, very, very small amounts. They're partly released by volcanoes and by soil and by erosion, and it's a natural process for them to blow around the world, and people inhale them in, like I said, very tiny amounts, and they absorb them through their lungs. Trace minerals can be stored in our bodies. Probably the most famous one is iodine. Iodine can be stored in your thyroid gland for 2 years, and so we might have a store in our bones or in our glands or in other tissues that might last for a couple of years before we need to replenish it, and we're talking about very small amounts. So a good way to get trace minerals is to buy a trace mineral formula. They're very inexpensive. They are safe most of the time, and they're cheap. They usually have no dosing as far as how much of each mineral is included, because we're talking about incredibly small amounts, micrograms and lesser picograms. very small amounts of these different nutrients. It's important that they list the nutrients. It'd be nice for them to list each mineral. That would be ideal. And then there's also the world of colloidal minerals. I don't use colloidal minerals so much right now, not because they're terrible. They're just, it's very hard to measure what's in a colloidal mineral and know how much a person is getting. And arguably, you really don't know what you're getting in ionized, which is the most common simple form of trace minerals, either. You don't really know. So since we're not caring about dose as much as making sure we get across the spectrum of all the different represented trace minerals, we'd like to have a list of each mineral. Molybdenum, manganese, copper, strontium, all these different trace minerals. We'd like to have a list of as many as possible that are not radioactive. Then we come to the macro minerals, of which there's just a few, and we're talking about a macromineral formula that might involve, calcium, magnesium, zinc. These are things that we take in higher doses, up to hundreds of milligrams a day of these nutrients. And so you want to get in my opinion, most adults want to get a macro mineral or a multi-mineral that includes those top 8-ish or so minerals like calcium and magnesium and zinc without iron. And the reason for that is iron can be pretty toxic unless you're anemic. And, most Americans don't need extra iron, but some people do, certainly. But I just don't like to have iron supplemented in a general mineral. If I'm going to supplement iron, I want evidence and proof for it from blood work. And I want to use a special plant-based iron that's standalone that I can change its dose. So I like to keep my iron supplements separate from my multi-mineral supplements. So for me, I like to see a macro multi-mineral without iron. I like to see a trace mineral formula, which is usually a liquid or it could be a pill or a capsule, that is just micro doses of a vast array of minerals. And I like to see a side bar of something like iron. Iron would be a product that would be not used in most people, but certainly used when necessary and cut off when in a short period of time. You just don't want to overload somebody on iron because excess iron can cause liver cancer and heart disease and a bunch of other problems. So we don't want to mess with that unless we are testing blood work and measuring things correctly. There are vegan issues, and I'll do a special issue on veganism and vegetarianism. Those are special problems that need, I think, good science and good measurement. And then lastly, we would benefit from testing patients for heavy metals, because if a patient has a heavy metal burden that they're not clearing in their body, it's very likely that they won't absorb minerals very well. And so we like to test hair. The gold standard for heavy metal testing is hair for chronic use. Now, blood is of course the standard for acute poisoning. If a person has acute metal poisoning, then blood testing is definitely the best test. But it's only good for about 9 weeks after industrial toxic exposure. After about 9 weeks since the exposure, the human body tends to sequester and shove away all of the heavy metals that have been absorbed from the blood into the different organs and tissues and stash it away. So if you're looking for chronic heavy metal exposure, hair analysis is the best way to look at total body burden, because it measures about 120 days of output into the hair shaft and hair cells, so that the hair can be taken apart in the laboratory and destroyed, and its components will show those individual heavy metals from basically torching the hair and destroying it. So heavy metals are extremely important for anti-nutrient capacity. If a person has heavy metal exposure, they won't be able to absorb their minerals. If a person does have heavy metal exposure, there are many ways to get rid of that, but I believe in the slow method, not necessarily in the fast method for chronic exposure. For acute exposure, a person should see a medical doctor or a toxicologist, and they may need chelation therapy or other types of heroic interventions. But for chronic exposure, it's not my favorite thing. There are lots and lots of reasons why it's not the best, but there are also some reasons why it could be very good. And so I won't tell you never use chelation therapy. I'll just say that use it wisely, like any medical procedure. And it is a prescription, and it is a controlled substance. If a person has been trying B vitamins, especially over time, and they tried a B complex and they felt a lot of energy, and then after a while the B complex didn't work like it used to, or it starts to work opposite and it starts to fatigue them and make them very fatigued, or it makes them very jumpy and anxiety ridden, where they don't have more energy, they just have this nervous energy. If they just have this nervous energy, then it may be a matter of rebalancing the B vitamins, because many B vitamins are the wrong form for a patient, and the wrong dose and the wrong ratio, in addition to not having the right minerals. So if a patient has a mineral deficiency, their B vitamins will not work properly, and they also will not be able to digest their protein. They won't be able to make stomach acid, because we require zinc to make stomach acid. So a person that's mineral deficient could have a whole lot of problems, and many of them will be medicated. So if you believe in the idea of progress from least invasive to more invasive, the very first question that every doctor should ask a patient is, are you missing any minerals? Now, we know that the soil is deficient in minerals in the United States. So basically, if you don't take a mineral supplement, or somehow find a way to get higher mineral content into your body, if you just eat food in the United States, you're going to be mineral deficient. And in fact, the literature shows, if you do some literature searches, you'll see that up to half of Americans don't even meet the RDA requirements, which is very poor, for magnesium. So the first thing we have to do in nearly any illness is ask ourselves, what is the patient missing? Are they getting these vital essential nutrients that are minerals before we jump on to vitamins, proteins, amino acids, and especially herbal medicines that are not even essential, not even required? Those are really good tools, but they're not very useful if you're not getting what you need to survive. So always look at essential nutrients first. And of the essential nutrients, minerals. That is assuming that you're getting water and oxygen.